This prospect was most welcome to me. I felt my life needed a shake-up. There was another thing, too. Moth-holes had appeared in the plush of matrimonial comfort. During the last weeks I had kept noticing that my fat Valeria was not her usual self, had acquired a queer restlessness, even showed something like irritation at times, which was quite out of keeping with the stock character she was supposed to impersonate. When I informed her we were shortly to sail for New York, she looked distressed and bewildered. There were some tedious difficulties with her papers. She had a Nansen, or better say nonsense, passport, which for some reason a share in her husband's solid Swiss citizenship could not easily transcend. And I decided it was the necessity of queuing in the prefecture and other formalities that had made her so listless, despite my patiently describing to her America, the country of rosy children and great trees, where life would be such an improvement on dull, dingy Paris. We were coming out of some office building one morning with her papers almost in order, when Valeria, as she waddled by my side, began to shake her poodle head vigorously without saying a word. I let her go on for a while, and then asked if she thought she had something inside. She answered, I translate from her French, which was, I imagine, a translation in its turn of some Slavic platitude, "There is another man in my life." Now, these are ugly words for a husband to hear. They dazed me, I confess. To beat her up in the street there and then, as an honest Bulgarian might have done, was not feasible. Years of secret sufferings had taught me superhuman self-control. So I ushered her into a taxi which had been invitingly creeping along the curb for some time, and in this comparative privacy I quietly suggested she comment her wild talk. A mounting fury was suffocating me. Not because I had any particular fondness for that figure of fun, Madame Humbert, but because matters of legal and illegal conjunction were for me alone to decide, and here she was, Valeria, the comedy wife, brazenly preparing to dispose in her own way of my comfort and fate. I demanded her lover's name. I repeated my question, but she kept up a burlesque babble, discoursing on her unhappiness with me and announcing plans for an immediate divorce. "Mais qui est-ce?" I shouted at last, striking her on the knee with my fist, and she, without even wincing, stared at me as if the answer were too simple for words, then gave a quick shrug and pointed at the thick neck of the taxi-driver. He pulled up at a small cafe and introduced himself. I do not remember his ridiculous name, but after all those years I still see him quite clearly, a stocky white Russian ex-colonel with a bushy moustache and a crew cut. There were thousands of them plying that fool's trade in Paris. We sat down at a table. The Tsarist ordered wine, and Valeria, after applying a wet napkin to her knee, went on talking into me rather than to me. She poured words into this dignified receptacle with a volubility I had never suspected she had in her, and every now and then she would volley a burst of Slavic at her stolid lover. The situation was preposterous, and became even more so when the taxi colonel, stopping Valeria with a possessive smile, began to unfold his views and plans. With an atrocious accent to his careful French, he delineated the world of love and work into which he proposed to enter hand in hand with his child wife Valeria. She by now was preening herself between him and me, rouging her pursed lips, tripling her chin to pick at her blouse bosom, and so forth. And he spoke of her as if she were absent, and also as if she were a kind of little ward that was in the act of being transferred for her own good from one wise guardian to another even wiser one. And although my helpless wrath may have exaggerated and disfigured certain impressions, I can swear that he actually consulted me on such things as her diet, her periods, her wardrobe, and the books she had read or should read. "I think," he said, "she will like Jean-Christophe." Oh, he was quite a scholar, Mr. Taxovich. I put an end to this gibberish by suggesting Valeria pack up her few belongings immediately, upon which the platitudinous colonel gallantly offered to carry them into the car. Reverting to his professional state, he drove the Humberts to their residence, and all the way Valeria talked, and Humbert the Terrible deliberated with Humbert the Small whether Humbert should kill her or her lover, or both, or neither. I remember once handling an automatic belonging to a fellow student in the days, I've not spoken of them, I think, but never mind, when I toyed with the idea of enjoying his little sister, a most diaphanous nymphette with a black hair bow, and then shooting myself. I now wondered if Valechka, as the colonel called her, was really worth shooting, or strangling, or drowning. She had very vulnerable legs, and I decided I would limit myself to hurting her very horribly as soon as we were alone. But we never were. Valechka, by now shedding torrents of tears tinged with the mess of her rainbow makeup, started to fill anyhow a trunk and 2 suitcases and a bursting carton, and visions of putting on my mountain boots and taking a running kick at her rump were of course impossible to put into execution with the cursed colonel hovering around all the time. I cannot say he behaved insolently or anything like that. On the contrary, he displayed, as a small sideshow in the theatricals I had been inveigled in, a discreet old-world civility, punctuating his movements with all sorts of mispronounced apologies. Je demande pardon, excuse me, est-ce que je puis, may I, and so forth, and turning away tactfully when Valechka took down with a flourish her pink panties from the clothesline above the tub. But he seemed to be all over the place at once, le gredin, agreeing his frame with the anatomy of the flat, reading in my chair my newspaper, untying a knotted string, rolling a cigarette, counting the teaspoons, visiting the bathroom, helping his moll to wrap up the electric fan her father had given her, and carrying streetward her luggage. I sat, with arms folded, one hip on the windowsill, dying of hate and boredom.